Today we have two readings that begin with the same word, or at least the same idea, in their original languages. In the very familiar text we just heard Pastor Karen read from the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 5, we hear the repeated refrain, "Blessed are," or in other translations, "Happy are." Now, despite the familiarity of the language, the list of character traits that Jesus called blessed or happy from his Sermon on the Mount really do not feel that familiar at all. They actually seem quite peculiar and counter to the ways in which we have been instructed about happiness and blessing in our culture and even in our churches. #blessed has been associated with everything from the kind of car we drive to the random coincidences that we conveniently blame upon the divine, like the parking place close to the door at Target that opens up just when we pull up to the store, or the weather clearing off in time for the long-planned afternoon picnic, or the perfect color of Stanley tumbler received as a gift. #blessed. The popular prosperity gospel is built on such an understanding of the divine and divine blessing. Do right, and God will reward you. But isn't it curious that no one ever posts on Instagram something like we heard from the Beatitudes? Being persecuted for righteousness' sake, #blessed. Or am in a season of mourning, feeling blessed. No, that would seem ridiculous. Yet phrases like these highlight the lists that come from the Beatitudes in Jesus' sermon. Jesus appears to be pushing his audience then, and those of us reading this text some 2,000 years later, to think more deeply about what it means to understand the complexity and challenges of life through the lens of divine presence, not material blessing. He flips the table of blessing upside down. That's his way. Flipping tables. And then we have Psalm 1, the first psalm in a collection of 150 psalms or songs that have served as the songbook of people of faith for literally millennia. It seems as though the early editors of this sacred compilation placed this particular psalm, Psalm 1, at the beginning of the collection as an introduction to the entire thing. It sets the stage for what the reader, the singer, will experience throughout the entire body of the Psalms. And how does it begin? It starts with the same phrase with which each beatitude began. Blessed is the one. Happy is the one. The psalmist then goes on to paint a picture of two different pathways, a binary of choice of sorts that is ever before each one of us, a way that leads to fullness of life, depth of connection, and flourishing, juxtaposed against a way that leads to separation and decay. Now, one word of caution here. As you read or listen to the text of the psalm, try hard not to hear the psalm as pitting one person against another, the pious versus the wicked, the righteous and the unrighteous. Instead, listen as if these two paths are in front of each one of us as we journey throughout life. So with all of that in mind, I now invite us to hear our third lesson this morning, Psalm 1, And I'm going to read from an adaptation of the Tanakh, which is a Jewish translation of the Hebrew Scriptures. It includes the Torah, instructions or teachings, the prophets, and the writings. So Psalm 1. Happy is the human who has not followed the counsel of the wicked, or taken the path of sinners, or joined in the company of the insolent. Rather, the instruction of the Lord is their delight, and they reflect, meditate on that teaching day and night. That one is like a tree planted beside streams of water, which yields its fruit in season, whose foliage never fades, and whatever it produces lasts. Not so the wicked. Rather, they are like the chaff that the wind blows away. Therefore, the wicked will not survive judgment, nor will sinners in the assembly of the righteous. For the Lord watches over the way of the righteous, but the way of the wicked is doomed. Friends, this is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. We have to decide on sermon titles on Wednesday. If I was going to pick my sermon title later in the week, it would have changed just a bit. It would have not just been the way, it would have been the way of the tree. So keep that in mind as we journey together. I was lucky enough to live in the same house from the moment I was brought home from the hospital until I left for college. It's a 2-story Cape Cod-style house on 3/4 of an acre just outside of the city limits. And when I visit my mom today, I return to that same house that I called home for all those years, all those decades ago. She still lives there. There are stories there. So many stories. As they say, if the walls could talk, well, actually, if those walls could talk, I would like to ask you to pay no attention to their voices. The walls are likely lying, or at least stretching the truth a little bit, and that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Perhaps it's needless to say, but I'll say it anyway. There is a deep connection to that space that is unique to me. It's sacred, really. The neighborhood holds some of the deepest mysteries of my becoming. Swimming in the pond late at night during the dog days of summer because we didn't have air conditioning. Catching fireflies in our backyard or in the valley. Sledding down the hills in our neighborhood. Riding bikes with friends. Building Legos and playing Nerf basketball in my bedroom. Spending time alone in the woods behind my house. My earliest memories, my first crushes, both physical and emotional scars, they all happened there. One of the characteristics of that neighborhood that I love the most are the trees. The beautiful, majestic, stately, mature, old trees. I discovered pretty quickly that I loved these trees. I love all trees. I still love trees. But I had my favorites. In fact, there were 3 that I spent a lot of time around or in as a youth. In our front yard, we had the most magnificent weeping willow tree. It's no longer there, but I've never seen another one quite like it. It was taller than our 2-story house, and its draping canopy was over 20 feet in diameter, and its leaves dragged across the ground every time the wind blew. Then there was this wonderful sycamore tree in the valley. It was actually a set of twins, and there was a bump that formed in between the 2 of them that made for the perfect jump on my bike after screaming down the biggest hill in the valley. Now, Please don't tell my mom. She still doesn't know that I used to do that. But my favorite tree of the bunch was this iconic oak tree in the middle of the road. Yeah, a giant oak right smack in the middle of one of the main roads in the neighborhood. The road actually splits to go around the tree. The designers and developers of Brookhaven in the early 1960s had the foresight not to disturb this giant when they built the neighborhood. And then less than 15 yards away from that tree is the neighborhood pond. Now somehow, in the clutter of growing up, in the struggle of becoming, this 30-foot tall tree was safe for me. It was a fortress of sorts. Sitting beside this giant tree trunk, yeah, even in the middle of the road, it was a place where I could breathe. It was a really quiet street. It helped me know that I was connected to something bigger than myself. It gave me a sense of rootedness. It helped me be filled with wonder with natural things. It even gave me a sense of purpose in some strange way. It taught me about the universe. And I cannot even begin to tell you how many acorns I brought home from that tree throughout the years just so that I could have a piece of it with me in my bedroom. You likely have such places too, places that root you, ground you. You know, we have an oak tree like that one right outside the windows of the west side of the sanctuary. It's our Ralston oak. It's a giant pin oak. It's older than Northminster itself. And our own master gardener, Linda Furness, told me this week that this tree's root system likely stretches out at least as far as the tree is wide, which is some 75 feet in diameter by my measurement. And it has a depth of at least 15 feet. She also told me that to understand the health of the roots of a tree, she always looks at the top of the tree. Because if the top of the tree is struggling or dying, that's a sure sign that the roots aren't doing well. Now consider that for a moment. And then think about what the psalmist writes. What this psalm communicates at the beginning of the Psalter. The one who takes their delight in, who dwells in, who meditates on, who is rooted in the teachings, the instructions, the life-giving, never-wavering way of the divine, the one who dwells there thrives. Like the tree planted by streams of water. Because of the strength of the roots, they are able to stand in the sun and in the rain and in the wind, the adversity that inevitably comes its way. What they do lasts. That somehow is a blessing. One of my rabbis and my friend, Rabbi Jordana Chernow Reeder, who's the associate rabbi at Indianapolis Hebrew Congregation, told me that trees are very important in Judaism. In fact, the Torah itself is called the tree of life. She said this: it helps us grow. It grows with us throughout our lives. like trees. Planted by streams of water is the community, rooted deep in the teachings, in the instruction. When Jesus was asked once about which instruction, which teachings were most important, do you remember what he said? In response to the one that asked, he said, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul and with all your mind. This is the greatest and first commandment. And the second one is like it, love your neighbor as yourself." These two teachings, instructions, capture all the law and all the prophets, he said. When we are rooted there, in that teaching, in that instruction, the one that captures the entire law and the prophets, all we do lasts because the instruction itself shall never fail. When that teaching takes up residence deep inside, the poor in spirit behold the kingdom of heaven. Those who mourn find comfort. Those who hunger and thirst for a right path are filled. The merciful receive mercy. The peacemakers are called children of God. Their roots run deep. Their canopy, a shelter. The fruit of their labors nourishes others. Reverend Catherine Willis Pershey wrote this: "Whenever I pass by an oak, it makes me start murmuring about becoming a tree planted by water." It's an image of joy made complete, deep roots drawing nourishment from living water. When I meditate on these scriptures, when I receive and keep these words, I discover a word who meditates on me. In interiorizing the prayers of Jesus himself, the Psalms, I discover that I am interiorized by Jesus himself. This is our root system. It's what connects us. It's where we find nourishment. It is our lifeblood. It is that through which we stand. Strong, tall, even in the midst of the storms. The scriptures, the instructions, the teachings hold us firm. Even when the earth begins to give way, they hold us. They give us a sense of rootedness through the God to whom they point. Because these truths, these teachings have shaped you and continue to form you, Northminster Presbyterian Church, you have become like a tree planted by streams of water. Your roots run deep. Your canopy spreads wide, and all find rest in your branches. The fruit you produce lasts and nourishes others. Indeed, like the Ralston oak, your life together gives testimony to all who come into your presence, not for your own sake, but to the glory of God. Your way is the way of a tree planted by streams of water. To God be the glory. Amen.